Sam. Welcome back to Syncounting Tax Academy. This is the place where we learn how taxes really work, slowly, clearly, and without fear. A lot of people think taxes are scary. They hear words like IRS, debt, or collection, and their stomach tightens up. But here's something important we teach at Syncounting Tax Academy. Most fear comes from not knowing how things actually work. Today, we're learning one of the most important rules in the entire tax system. The IRS cannot collect anything until something is officially written down. That single step is where everything begins. Sam, I have a question. How does the IRS even know when someone owes money? Do they just decide one day and send a letter? Sam, that's a really smart question, Samai. A lot of people think the IRS just guesses or randomly picks numbers. But that's not how it works. The IRS doesn't assume, they don't guess, and they don't collect based on feelings. They wait until a number is officially written into their records. Until that happens, there is no official debt. That written number has a name. It's called an assessment. Leighton. Think of an assessment like a scoreboard at a basketball game. Before the referee writes the score on the board, players might think they're winning. The crowd might cheer, but nothing is official yet. Once the score is written, now it counts. Samai. So if the score isn't written, the game doesn't really know who's winning? Leighton. Exactly. And taxes work the same way. Until the IRS writes the number down, there is no official amount owed. Sam. An assessment is the IRS saying, this is the number we're putting on the record. Before that moment, nothing can move forward. Samai. But it's just writing, right? Why does writing it down matter so much? Sam. Because in the tax world, writing something down gives it legal power. Words spoken don't count. Thoughts don't count. Even estimates don't count. Only what's written in the IRS system becomes real. That's why assessments are so important. Sam. Now let's talk about how an assessment actually happens. One common way is when people file a tax return. They look at their income. They calculate their taxes, and they say, this is what I owe. When the IRS accepts that return and records the number, that becomes an assessment. Leighton. Another way happens when someone doesn't file a return at all. The IRS still receives information from employers, banks, and other sources. So the IRS puts together what they think the person earned. Then they calculate a number and write it down themselves. That written number is still an assessment. Samai. Even if the person didn't agree? Sam. Yes. Which is why understanding your rights is so important. Sam. The moment the IRS writes that number down, something new exists. A tax balance. Before that moment, there was nothing official. After that moment, the account becomes active. This is the exact moment collection cases begin. Leighton. Everything the IRS does later starts here. Letters, notices, deadlines. All of it traces back to the assessment date. Samai. You said something about a clock earlier. What clock? Sam. Once an assessment happens, a legal clock starts ticking. That clock controls how long the IRS is allowed to try to collect the money. Before the assessment, there is no clock. After the assessment, time starts moving. Leighton. That's why tax professionals pay close attention to assessment dates. Time changes everything. Sam. Here's something that helps people relax. Before an assessment, the IRS cannot collect. They cannot take money. They cannot force payment. They cannot start collection actions because there is nothing official yet. Samai. So the IRS has limits? Leighton. Absolutely. The IRS follows rules written into law. One of the biggest rules is simple. No assessment means no collection. Lola. And here's the really important part. Just because a number is written doesn't mean it's correct. People are allowed to disagree with an assessment. Samai. Really? They can say it's wrong? Lola. Yes. They can ask questions. They can provide documents. They can correct mistakes. They can even ask for another review. Sam, the IRS works with millions of accounts. Mistakes happen. That's why the law gives people rights. Leighton, most fear comes from not knowing the order of things. People imagine the IRS as instant and unstoppable, but the system has steps. Samai, and steps mean time? Sam, exactly. When you understand the steps, you understand your options. Knowledge replaces panic. Sam, let's put everything together. First, a number must be written down. That's the assessment. Then, the IRS gains the right to collect. And even then, people still have protections. Leighton, the system has structure. Lola, and structure creates fairness. Leighton, the IRS can't collect what isn't written. Lala, and written numbers can be reviewed. Samai, so learning this helps people feel calm and confident. Sam, that's exactly why we teach it. Sam, at Syncounting Tax Academy, we believe understanding taxes should feel empowering, not frightening. When you know how the system works, fear loses its power, because here, knowledge always comes first. Tagline, knowledge first, fear last.